Siblings and sisters and brothers in Christ, welcome to Thursdays for the Soul. This is a consistent program every Thursday wherein we offer something for your soul, something to think about that brings you closer to your relationship with God and to each other. And it's all sorts of different things: music, psalms, interviews with key leaders, and beyond. I am so happy to be here today, and I've got this I don't know. Adam, it's funny. I feel like I have this excitement to be in conversation with you because I've watched your journey from afar, from local pastor to the front page of Reddit, which is kind of wild.
Weird. It's weird.
So I want to introduce to all of you who are watching with us now or in the recording. This is Reverend Adam Ericksen, the pastor of Clackamas UCC, whom you may recognize. If you don't recognize his shirt, you may recognize him from the front page of Reddit, which is probably something that you're wondering, what does that even mean? Having said that, we're going to have a conversation about, the journey of this church, which, just to give you a context of why this is important. Adam, your church has a Facebook page, an Instagram, you've got a TikTok. Did I miss any?
Twitter. We're on Twitter.
You got the Twitter.
Yeah.
Yes. And you, across all of those platforms, we did the math earlier today, you have 70,000 followers. For those of you who are watching, that is about 8% comparatively of the membership total of the United Church of Christ. This is critically important because so why don't we start at the beginning? How did you get from there to where we are now?
Well, I always like to start off saying that what worked for Clackamas UCC might not work for everyone, right? So that goes for all of the things that I'm about to say. But when I was hired at the church about a little over 3 years ago now, we had about 35 members showing up consistently on a Sunday. And they said that they wanted to grow. And at the time, and I think I've even heard more that now. Before.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And at the time when I was interviewing with them, I said, I don't know if we're going to grow numbers by doing this, but what I want to do in my life and at any church that I'm at is live out the justice of Jesus. And I told them what I meant by that was that I hope I'm okay saying this, the loudest people in the Christian room are known for being anti certain folks, anti-LGBTQ, anti Black Lives Matter, right? And so we have to increase our volume, because I'm convinced that the reason that people aren't going to progressive Christian churches is not because we're a progressive Christian church, but because they don't know that we exist. Because we have ceded the Christian game, the Christian definition, I should say, to the loudest people in the room, to the extent that that progressive Christians tend to be ashamed of calling ourselves Christians. We try to find different words for it: followers of Jesus, whatever we call ourselves. We need to be louder because we're letting the loudest people in the room define what Jesus and Christianity is all about. So I told them, we're going to have to get out and tell people who we are and quit saying we're not that kind of Christian. Start saying louder what kind of Christian we are. And so I didn't tell them this, but we had this sign that was this kind of old wooden sign that said Clackamas United Church of Christ, worship Sundays at 10:30. And that's all it said. And people drove by it and they already knew what it said. So I was like, maybe one way that we can get the word out about who we are is to get a sign where we on the road and put messages up there. Well, I was very early on, and fortunately, I had some trust with them. Although later they said, really spending this amount of money on getting a sign sounds like a horrible idea. But fortunately, they trusted me enough in it. And yeah, there we go. Oh, you had to put that one up. Oh my goodness. Um, uh, so I was just convinced that we had to get this message out. And the best way to get it out to our local community was to get a sign and just put up their progressive Christian messages, Jesus justice messages. And it got the message out to our community, but I didn't know how effective that sign would be in getting the message out to the wider community on social media. It just kind of exploded right off the bat, and I started doing it by it was a little awkward for me, but I put myself in the picture because Christian, not like to say,
Well, you're a white
not to
guy.
make it about
It
me,
matters.
right?
It matters where your body shows up and what message is there.
Exactly. Christianity is incarnational. And it matters that a human person with a collar is standing by this message. And so that's what it was about.
I think that's particularly important, for those of us who call ourselves white, when we stand with the messages that we call gospel, with the messages aligned with the gospel. We know, particularly because of that first point you made, that oftentimes Christianity is so distant. The cultural Christianity is distant from the progressive, the radical messages of the revolutionary Jesus. Yeah.
It's about putting human flesh and blood and skin in the game. And we're on a busy street, which was one of the other reasons that I wanted to do this, because I knew that people would see me as they drive by, and I get some middle fingers every once in a while. I get some people rolling down their windows and shouting words that are not suitable for this broadcast, but they drive by. The people who actually stop are ones who typically say, "Thank you so much. We need more of this from Christianity." And that's what I've learned. That's probably the best thing coming from this, is that there is a large percentage of people who may not identify as Christian, or who may identify as Christian also, who are just really thirsty for this kind of
thirsty for
message.
Jesus.
Yes. Yes, who want this. And there are a lot of people, this is what I've learned too. There are a lot of people who have overtly, we have a lot of atheists who join us on our services online, who have come to our worship services when we were pre-COVID, and they've rejected the God who has been presented to them by the loudest people in the room. And I say, thank God for that. Thank God that you have rejected that. But they always say, I haven't rejected Jesus. I'm here for Jesus. And I'm like, awesome.
Same.
Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that. As long as you are like wanting to create a more loving and just world, then let's do this together. Yeah.
I think that, so the first time that I saw that sign really was, God, I'm outing myself in a whole bunch of different ways now, but I received that. I choose to. The first time I saw that was on the front page of Reddit, Adam, where this is a social platform wherein all sorts of things happen, and you see both the wonders and the darkest parts of the internet, and that's just what it is. That's fine. And you were standing by that sign, and I forget what message it was, but it was critical, along the lines of, Jesus said, Black Lives Matter. Jesus said, all of these different things.
Yeah.
And, I think that one of the unique places that folks like you, and I would probably say me, operate is this bridge between the institutions of the churches that have raised us and
Yeah.
the community of our peers, the community of people who are seeking or wondering or reaching and wanting to make meaning that don't have any access points to that institution. And so where we end up is this constant bridge of like, I'm going to be translating this meme to my 80-year-olds who don't get it, but they think it's kind of cute and it's cool that these folks showed up. And your fundraiser made how much money? Like, how did that happen? And
Yeah.
there's no way to make that translation easy, particularly because, and this is, hear me, this is not critique. It is awareness of difference. And, in the pre-show, when we were comparing tattoos and talking about, all of these various things. One of the things that we were also talking about is this, awareness of difference and how it sometimes functions in a linguistic way that has different access points. Speaking the language of the internet has made incredible things happen, in ways that are not imaginable beyond before today, not imaginable 10 years ago. I mean, I'm thinking about how, anyway, all of which to say, at some point you posted that on Facebook and it went viral. What was that like? When you started?
It was weird. The first message that I posted that got immediate reaction from our local community was, you'll remember this, was no woman should be called horseface, right? And this was obviously around a time when a certain president was still in office and had things to say about a certain woman. And to me, it just felt so obvious, this particular message. And I put it up there, and immediately I had 3 cars, 5 total women come down to talk to me. And one of them, the first one, came down and said, "Why are you so political? This is a political message, and politics and church should not come together."
And of course, you had the clear answer to that many UCC pastors will pull out of their pocket and say,
well, I don't know. Well, the gospel is political. That's what I would have said. But what I ended up saying to her was, since when is the statement that a woman should not be called horseface a political statement? Are you kidding me? What world are we living in when you have to say?
I like that response better.
I'm like, am I in, like, saying middle schoolers shouldn't say this is obvious. But when we're defending this kind of language, it's so a lot of the message that I put up there are not like, they're political. The gospel is political. Jesus was political. He had things to say about King Herod, calling him a fox, which was not like a term of endearment for a first century Jew. Talking about the kingdom of God while living in the empire of Rome is a politically loaded statement. So I'm not like I'm not trying to avoid politics so much, but I was just like stunned. So anyway, that was the first person. And then a couple other women came down and they were like, "Thank you for this. We need churches to say more things like this and to be out and public about this, because, again, the loudest people in the room." But I had been pretty freaked out about this experience, especially that first person coming. And it was near the beginning of this whole sign thing. So I called up members of my council and I was like, should I take it down? What should I do? And all of them. And this, unfortunately, in our congregation and many congregations like this, tends to be an age demographic that is older than I am. And so that's one of the things that we've had to struggle with. Not that that's good or bad, it's just a thing. But every one of them said, keep the thing up there, keep that message up there. So each of them had my back. And one of them even said, Adam, be brave.
Oh, wow. Gosh,
Yeah.
you know,
I was
those
like,
must
oh
be
my
words
goodness.
that you have clung
Yeah.
to throughout this whole journey.
Yeah.
It is often said that, you know, when you're putting something out into the world, and this is true for anyone, no matter what kind of leader you are, but you're going to get feedback. It will
Yep.
be critique. It
Yes.
will be, you know, affirmation. You will get feedback. And how
Yep.
you hold that and differentiate your call from that feedback is, I mean, that's a journey we all go through.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that I have witnessed along this journey, you know, in your leadership and in the leadership of your congregation, is that how you've done this, you know, all throughout, is in conversation with your congregation. And here's why that matters, is because now I'm speaking not to you directly, so I want to be very clear. It's with an awareness of how social media functions, with a handle on making content in that particular way. For a charismatic, radical pastor to gain a following, I mean, you told me you got on TikTok 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago?
Well, no, about 3 months ago.
3 months ago. Still, I mean, it's valid. 3 months ago, you joined a platform and you said radical statements that you believe because of your faith.
Yeah.
And there are 40,000 people paying attention to what you say. There are hundreds of thousands of people viewing what you say. So, you know, I stress this not to make you anxious about the exposure, but to say that this matters. And, you know, it's really important, particularly as we, the United Church of Christ, imagine what church is, what church can be. All of you are wondering, how do we reach people? How do we reach out? How do we get there? How do we get, you know, interest in the message of Jesus in this particular way? And this is a way, not the only way.
Yeah.
It is a way. And, you know, was done with your congregation alongside you for the challenge and the support and the hard places and joyful places and beyond. So there is opportunity there. And the relationship that you have built with your congregation is super important in the opportunity. You know, before I ask you another question, I'm also now I'm thinking about all of it. But how, what would it be like for a congregation to support kind of these creative outlets of the gifts and talents that are naturally within their pastors? And you know, sometimes that happens with a lot of joy, and sometimes that's like, we don't understand that. No, thank you. So it's a journey. There's lots of learning.
It is.
I'm going to ask you, what was the hardest part? What's been the hardest part?
What's been the hardest part? I think the hardest part, right now the hardest part is keeping up with the members of the congregation who aren't technologically savvy, who can't do Zoom, who don't have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, who are just feeling so isolated. And, you know, somebody like me, I'm like, just download Zoom onto your computer and join us for coffee hour. And they try. and they feel even more isolated because
Wow.
they can't download Zoom. They can't get the whatever it is just right. And it ends up making folks feel more isolated than they were before they tried, and more frustrated than they were before they tried.
Yeah.
And that has been the biggest challenge, pastoring to those folk. Especially, they can't join the Bible study that we do on Zoom, or the prayer group that we do on Thursday night, or coffee hour that we do after our worship service. And so the ways that I've been able to keep up with them is by calling them, which has been both incredibly nurturing for me, because I get to have one-on-one conversations with them, even if it's over the phone. But also at the same time, it's incredibly time consuming. And while it gives me something positive, it's also strangely, it's stressful. It's also really hard at the same time. So one of the ways that we've moved together as a church about that, which many churches have done, is, we have our calling and caring committee, and those folks keep up with a lot of the people who are in that category, who don't do technology all that well. So that's the last 8 months, that's been the hardest part. Before that, one of the things that happens, this conversation, is what happens when your church goes viral.
Yeah.
Boundaries have been pretty hard.
Oh my gosh, tell me about that.
We have some folks sharing some of our content who say, "Oh, this is my church." And they live on the other side of the country, and I've never met them before. And that's like amazing and fantastic. But what does it mean when you have somebody on the other side of the country that you haven't met before saying that this is their church, right? I have some folks who contact me asking for pastoral care, which is awesome. And I'm glad that they do it, but it's also hard.
This is a thing that spiritual entrepreneurs, spiritual innovators come into often, which is, how do I scale this? And when something goes viral, there's no chance to figure out how you scale your work. There's no chance to figure out how you prioritize your time, because you go from 0 to several 100,000, each one of them. You have people in all sorts of different ways of life, people who are there to comment in affirmation, people who are there to troll, which, means that they just want to tell you to go to hell and die, which I'm sure is something that people have also said to you directly. What do you do with that?
You know who your audience is. You're very clear. I'm very clear about who my audience is. And the reason that matters is that there are people who tell me that I am a false prophet, I'm going to hell, and I'm bringing my congregation and all of the people on TikTok with me. They're not my audience. My audience is the transgender person who messages me on Facebook saying, "I was about to jump, and I saw one of your messages on your sign that says that our transgender siblings have heartbeats. Jesus loves our transgender siblings. Be like Jesus." I saw that sign and I was like, I'm okay. Right? That's my audience. My audience is all of the people who have rejected God because of the false idol that they have been told. Again, thank God they've rejected that God. But there's something better.
Yeah.
Right? That's my audience. And so on my church Facebook page, I'm very quick to ban people who come on there to troll, because our church Facebook page is for people who, I'm still trying to figure out this language, for people who are needing a more healing brand of Christianity. And if there are going to be people on there who are trolling and be against that kind of Christianity, and you're banned. You're not here.
Yeah.
We like to say, here's another story from before, right about the beginning of the sign, actually. It was
The
around
before, the
Christmas
sign
time.
and after sign.
Yeah, right. It was like the beginning of the sign. And I had put up on the sign something about being open and affirming. And it was around Christmas time, and that detail matters a little bit. But there was a man who came in to our church after our worship service, and it happened to be it was an Advent, so it happened to be the Sunday that we were decorating our church. We were hanging the greens at our church, and this man comes in demanding to speak to the pastor. And he says, I saw your sign out there that was about how you accept gay people into your church. And I said, yeah, okay. And he goes, well, I think you're wrong. And what if I started coming to this church and wanted to become a member because you welcome everyone? Would we be able to have a conversation about being gay and at the church? And I said, no. And as we were talking, our 70-year-old gay lawyer was hanging the greens over here. Our a black woman who's a lesbian was hanging the greens over there, and they were doing it together. And I was like, we're not having this conversation. We've already had this conversation. And as far as I'm concerned, Jesus took care of this 2,000 years ago, and we're not talking about it again. So no, we're not having this conversation. And yeah, you're welcome to come. You're welcome to come, but we're not having that conversation.
That's a
So there
boundary.
may be another church that you're more comfortable at. You might want to go there.
Yeah, I love that. And that, that is a statement for the toolboxes of so many people, right? This is a place where, and then you have your explicit welcome statements, transgender
Yes.
siblings, the people who are in the cultural Christianity often positioned anti. You've got your explicit welcome statements, and then people come saying, but what about me? And
yep.
that whole, there will be welcome for you somewhere else. You are welcome to go there is so powerful, so powerful.
Yes.
Because I am really lucky that as like a wee baby gay, I grew up in a UCC church. I never had to wonder if welcome was for me, because even in the processes of that church, as they were having all of those congregations, et cetera, conversations, et cetera, there was enough out there in our ecosystem that I could locate myself within it. And that's a privilege. So the work of being explicitly welcome because of your faith is so necessary and needed. Yeah. Wow.
Well, and I think I don't know how to say this, so I'll just try to throw it out there.
Carefully. We'll try it out.
I know, right? See how this fits. I think that in a lot of progressive Christian, I mean, I've kind of said this before, but I think in a lot of our progressive churches, I don't know, we feel, here's one way of looking at it. We talk amongst ourselves.
Oh, we're so good
and
at that.
we get a little bit siloed, and we forget that there are a lot of folks out there who may be Hindu, Buddhist, atheist, whatever, non agnostic. Just they're the nuns, right? They're not UCC. They're the nuns. But we need to get this message out to them too, right? So how do we do that and not make it about the numbers that we get on our social media? Because one of my big concerns in all of this is, oh, Adam did it this way, so I'm going to give it a try, and it doesn't work. Well, what does work mean? Work for me, it's just getting the message out there and trusting that God's going to do what God's going to do with it. Getting it out there.
One of the things that is important about your journey, from what I have seen, from where I sit, which is granted afar with occasional conversations along the way, is that you've been really authentic through it. you're not, this goes back to that kind of language piece where, I saw someone asking, well, how do I get on TikTok? I think it's the same as any other congregation you're seeking to serve. You get on something and then you watch, you listen, you see how the culture is moving and how the conversations are moving. You come in with humility, and then you show up in the authenticity of what you know to be your faith, what you know to be your call, what you are empowered into and empowered by your congregation and equipped by the Spirit to show up and say, this matters. This is what we need to be doing. Yes. And that requires a lot of humility. Because if you fail, you're going to fail so very publicly.
Yeah.
I mean, I say that as one who is also in that position and stumbles over my words all the time. You all know this.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like it's, if you fail, when you fail, you're going to fail. Yeah. I have stuck my foot in my mouth so many times. I've done things that I regret. I've been in therapy for the last 6 years. Thank God. Right. So this is just like, it's just part of the deal. It's just part of the deal. You could throw out some Richard Rohr, falling upward. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we fall and we fall forward, and that's how we learn. Mm-hmm. I, as a church that presents itself as being woke, as being anti-racist, we live in Portland, Oregon, which you may have heard about in the last 8 months as well, right? We are the whitest large city in the United States. Why is that the case? Because for the first 50 years, it was illegal to be Black and live in Oregon. We wanted to be the white state in the United States. We have racism. We had racism built into our Constitution as a state. And that continues to infect Oregon and Portland today. That's why you have seen so many of these protests during the summer. And yeah. It's a reckoning that the United States has to have, and it's a reckoning that Portland has to have. I'm telling you this because I have made mistake. We hired a wonderful, fantastic woman named Amira Stanley to be our leader of justice and witness at our church. And we knew Amira. She's a good friend of mine, and this is hard as a white, I don't want to make it about me, as a white person growing up in the United States in Portland. White supremacy runs through me. It's a part of who I am, and I have to reckon with it. My city has to reckon with it. My country has to reckon with it. And my church has to reckon with it, because we're a predominantly white church, and white supremacy comes out of us, no matter how woke we try to be. Mm-hmm. And Amira is dealing with that on a level that I can't even imagine. And so I have said some things where, as I'm saying them, I'm like, I think this is a white supremacist thing that's coming out of my mouth. Mm-hmm. And I'm saying that to Amira, and I'm like, I don't know if this is white. And Amira has to be the one who says, Adam, that was white supremacist. And so she's constantly taking this white supremacy into her and having to reflect it back to me. It's a constant teaching that our Black siblings are having to do in this moment. And that, you asked me what the hardest thing is. Keeping up with our a certain subset of our congregation who has a hard time with technology has been hard. This has been one of the hardest things too, having this reckoning with racism. As I'm trying to put up signs, messages on our sign that is like, we condemn white supremacy, right? Well, it's
You
in
know,
me too.
I think this is, there's all sorts of thoughts that I want to add into this. So one of the things I do want to say is that when all of the responsibility lies on one person like that, I think that's worth looking at.
Yep.
And I say that because, you know, not knowing anything more about your situation, not knowing anything more about who she is or how she pastors, but just the care that when you have one person set up to be the only accountability, there's problems there.
Yep.
So I'll say that because it must be said.
Yep.
And I also think that what you're saying is something that is a learning for the entirety of the United Church of Christ and beyond. How do we proclaim that which we need to be possible and hold ourselves accountable to getting there?
Yep. Yep.
How do we say the message of faith, the message of our faith, and let our words not be the end, but the beginning?
Yes.
You know, and I think part of that is just the work of proclamation. We say that which we want to believe, you know, and part of that is proclamation is great.
Yeah.
But you got to put your skin in the game. To go back what you were saying before, you got to put your body in it.
That's it.
You got to put your actions in it. It's not it's not what we say, because ultimately that's going to dissipate. It's what we do and how we do it. And that's a wrestling for any institution. I was having a conversation earlier today in thinking about, for any institution, whether that's the United Church of Christ as a whole, Christianity, and the various institutions that exist within us, or a local congregation as an institution, we are only as imaginative as the people who are a part of it.
Yes.
So what is our work in projecting the hope of the world we want to live in and co-create alongside God, saying that out loud, and then moving the steps to get there? And in the midst of all of that, we are going to mess it up very, very big. All of us, you know, whether that's working with the internalized dominance that white supremacy teaches me and the role that I am socialized into as a white woman in America.
Yes.
Or whether that's for folk wrestling with the internalized oppression. You know, that's all there. That's the water we swim in. And I'm thinking about, you know, the address that Reverend Dr. Starsky Wilson gave on Tuesday, which you can watch on the YouTube playlist of all of our conversations, wherein he said that if we've passed the tipping point where the children of America are more Black and brown and indigenous and children of color than there are people who call ourselves white. That matters because that means that racial justice has to be infused in every single thing that we do, because that will change. And we are now at the point of decision. How do we who are in positions of power, whatever they be, whatever they are, however we are, whomever we are, how do we approach that which is inevitable in alignment with, you know, for me, the questions I ask are in alignment with my faith, in alignment with my accountability, the people who hold me accountable for how I love, you know, and my church. And one of the things that you are doing, you know, you're talking about people across the country saying that is my church. You've made a pathway to church where people align with your belief and have kind of exploded the concept of church and membership altogether. And I, you know, from where I sit, I see that that's going to be a thing. We're going to have to deal with that at some point. You know, baby steps.
Yeah.
And there are 70,000 plus more people who have received, and hundreds and thousands of viewers, who have heard a message of a liberating gospel, who have heard a message of the radical Jew named Jesus, who have heard a message of a clear politic because of the work that you are doing, Adam, and the congregation that has supported you in it. You know, and you know, it matters. It's so important.
Thank you.
Whew. So before we go into some of the questions that are coming up, I want to ask you, in the midst of all of this, what are some of the moments that have stuck out at you and, sparkled your wonder about your call and the work you do?
Moments.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, that's a good question. It sparks wonder. I, so this whole um, TikTok thing happened because my 13-year-old son came up to me and said, "Dad, you should get a TikTok." And I was like, I don't want to get a TikTok, another social media thing. That's just going to take more time away from me. So I was like, okay, I'll do a TikTok, but you have to be in on some of my videos. So we started together doing our very first video on TikTok was about how I've noticed that one of the things that's healing for men, for women, for gender non-conforming folk is when we talk about God in different ways that are not traditionally the he word, right? So first video, I was like, I'm getting my son in here and we're going to talk about the divine feminine together. And I started talking about El Shaddai and how it means God of the mountain, God of the powerful, but it also means the many-breasted one. God is the one who's here to nourish us as a mother nourishes her child. And that's what El Shaddai means. And there's power in that. And I'm saying this with my son on this TikTok video. And I'm like, oh, I've had one of the things that's been tough as a pastor is um, that I have a wife who's not into God, who's not into church. She doesn't come to church, and I'm like totally cool with that. It's great. Do what you do, but at the same time, like my children are like not into church either so much, and they've got my wife and she's like, don't shame them into going to church. And I'm like, I wasn't trying to. So it was like the wonder of that moment was I'm having this really great experience with my son who will never go to church, but who is digging this conversation about God and the divine feminine. And I'm putting it out there to the world with my son, and that's fun.
That's amazing. I'm reminded of like one of the core tenets of any interfaith conversation, which, I'm projecting onto your family. So receive that or don't. But one of the tenets of that is showing up in the fullness of the authenticity of our faith. It's really easy to think that to be in an interfaith space, interfaith, no faith space, you dumb your faith all the way down. And what you have lived through the story of Clackamas UCC is when you turn your faith all the way up, what happens? There's a discipleship that's present there. There's an invitation that's present there. There's a conversation to be had as a result of what you've said present there. And none of that would have happened if you went in and it was still contained in a way where the people who know, and the people who don't know the building by the, beautiful garden.
Yeah. One of the things that reminds me of, and getting back to kind of the politics conversation, we live in Clackamas is kind of an area that's you tend to think of Portland as highly liberal. Clackamas has a good balance of conservative and liberal. So in fact, one of our county council members just got elected, but a year ago, he had posted Islamophobic messages on his Facebook account, which were basically, the trope that Muslims are just out to take over the world through Sharia law, and we need to rise up and defeat the Muslims, garbage like that. And it brought up in me how to respond as an authentic Christian who I wrote my master's thesis in part on Islam. So who has some knowledge on Islam and has Muslim friends. So I put up on our sign, as Christians, we want our county commissioners to know that Allah loves you. Right? So this is like a political message. I'm talking to county commissioners, but it's also, hey, the God of Islam is not a God who is against you, right? So that's like, I mean, and I've put up there when there are anti-Muslim sentiments going throughout our nation. I'll post like verses from the Quran up there.
Yeah.
And Chris, we have Muslims who are coming to our worship service as Muslims.
That's wild.
And they make comments, and I can't remember names, but they'll make comments, and I'll say, "Oh my gosh, I'm just so glad that you're here." And we're on this journey towards more mercy and more justice and more love in the world together. And thank God for that.
So I want to turn a little bit to some of the questions. And I also want to name that you have congregation members who are present in this conversation, and I've seen a bunch of love heaped upon you. So, and testimony to the work that you are doing. So the first question I want to raise, and I'm so grateful for, because, you know, even in me, I have to get rid of the internalized dominance that shows up in ways when I'm not expecting it, is from Kenneth Makuakane, who said, America was colored before it was whitewashed. Through the awakening of justice, through folks like you, America is returning to where it once began. When will leadership transform into followership to allow non-whites to preach and teach on all pulpits and other platforms? You know, yes. I think it speaks to the humility that I receive, and I'm grateful for that call in on, because you're right. The settler colonialism that got us to where we are even showed up in this conversation. So I thank you for the gracious feedback always. And we have continued work to do. I commit to continuing to do that work because of my faith, because I believe that we have the possibility of a more just, more loving, more intentional community building, more learning across difference for all of us, and particularly for those who have yet to learn what it is that we need to learn.
It's a constant, hopefully I'm constantly realizing my blindness to the white supremacy that runs through me. And
or in ways that we can shift from ableist language and say what I don't know.
Yep. And I need comments like that. So thank you.
You know, it's a practice, right? Like when we lead, and that's for pastors, for lay leaders, for folks who are, you know, saying it in, we have to practice saying it and practice calling each other better. And this is ongoing learning. So let me ask a few more questions that have come up, if that's okay. Let's see. A question from Eileen Soto. How does your ministry tether the mentally ill who are looking for God to be part of your church family?
This is something that I have also learned about too, is while we've gone online, we do our worship services live on Facebook. And while we've done that, I've received messages from folk who say that they will never enter into a church building for one reason or another. And one of those reasons is because of mental illness. They don't feel they have, a lot of folks have been ostracized by churches, told that they are not welcome at churches for various reasons. And so they won't enter into a church building, but they will be able to participate in a worship service that's online. They'll be able to comfortably write in the comment section. And oftentimes I've gotten messages from folks who say, I'm not going to enter into your church building because there are times when I have to leave. And I'll find that embarrassing if I have to leave during the middle of a service, and I don't want to do that. But if I have to leave during the middle of a service and it's an online service, nobody will see me and I'll be okay. So that's one of the biggest things about doing services online that I've noticed and that people have contacted me about is the safety issue of being in a large group or being in a small group, and having the freedom to enter and to leave whenever is comfortable.
Yeah, I feel like, there are so many who have gone before us to pave a way of imagination. And I'm thinking of how as soon as we think we've arrived, God is showing us that we have more to go, more to do. In other conversations, I've called that a queering of eschatology. Wherever we think the end is, there is more. I'm thinking of Angela Davis, who just had a birthday and wrote and speaks about freedom as a constant struggle. Like this, as soon as you arrive to what you think that is, there is more. And how much that has been and will be. I'm saying has been because the memories of church that, folks who are engaged in it now across any of these generations have are the memories of the church that has been their context. But even before that, there's been an adaptation and innovation. And let's be real, sometimes a colonization that Christianity has carried in ways that the message is continuing. One of the things that I appreciate about how, you and your congregation have held space with intention is the authenticity of your faith, the trust that your congregation has in you. And I am not naive enough to think that that has not happened without conflict. Because you are a church, I am sure that there's been conflict. He didn't talk to me about this before, y'all. So if you're like, I'm in this church, what is she talking? I am guessing that there was conflict. And the hope that comes forward as a result of moving through that or continuing to move through that and deciding who you are and who you want to be because of God. So as we are wrapping up, and don't go yet because there's more, but what I'm wondering is, what blessing do you have, Adam, for the folks who are listening now? What hope do you have for them in their work ahead?
Oh, my hope is that as you continue to do the work, the important work that's set before us, that you at the same time know that we're all in this together, that you're not alone, and at the deepest part of your being, you are loved, and you're going to make mistakes, as Chris said earlier, and those are going to happen, and we're going to learn from those mistakes. But no matter what you've done and no matter what you've left undone, you are loved as we continue the journey for a more just and loving world together.
Yes. So if this conversation has given you something to think about, if it's opened possibilities or allowed you to see beyond the metrics of membership and dollars into how the gospel is moving in the world, then I encourage you to consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. And that will help us to continue to bring you conversations that matter. Ideas that spark something that might not have otherwise been possible, and resources that you can use in your local congregation to see what of the conversation resonates and what inspires you to move forward in any direction. I want to also let you know that we've got a couple of incredible things upcoming. The first is on Tuesday, we're going to have a conversation as led by Roberto Ochoa called The State of Rural Churches, where rural church leaders in the United Church of Christ are going to speak to what is true and speak to where they are and what's important for them. Additionally, if you are inspired into nonviolent action, I want to let you know that the MLK days of service will be February 15th and 16th, and that you can register at ucc.org. So all of that information, all the links we've talked about, are either coming to you in an email after this conversation or are beneath the YouTube video where you can click them, see them, explore more. And Adam, if folks want to find you and follow you, where can they do that?
We've Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and what's that? TikTok.
And it's Clackamas UCC.
Clackamas UCC on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Pastor Adam at TikTok. So yeah.
Wonderful. Would you do us the honor of praying us out into the rest of our day?
Yes, thank you. Friends, let us pray. God of justice, God of love, God of mercy, God of the universe, we give thanks for this time, for the ability to talk about your church, the present and the future and the past. Help us to work for a more just world, as you would have the world to be. Remind us of your love for all people, for atheists, for our Jewish siblings and Muslim siblings, and Hindu and agnostic, and all of us. Help us to live into your realm where everyone has enough food and water and health care, because there is enough for all. In the name of the risen one, we pray together. Amen.
Crack myself up here.